Welcome to Read This or Die. Today we are filming a special video in Little India in Singapore to present to you 24 books that we think that you should read. These 24 books are divided in two lists of 12 books each. The first list ideally is addressed to youth. The second list ideally is addressed to adults. But of course you can read them in any order you want, whenever you want. So let's proceed with the first list of 12 books addressed ideally to young readers. The first book is I'm a Cat by Natsume Soseki. This Japanese author used a very advanced technique back then. In English, this technique is called ostranenie, which is a Russian word. That's technical English. The plain English would be defamiliarization. Do you know what is it about? You should read the book. The second book is Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. That's too much of a classic that we are not going to review in a normal video on YouTube. So I'm sure that you have seen many movies about Frankenstein. Just go ahead and read the book. Number 3 is Gulliver's Travels by Jonathan Swift. This book is very important because it connects you to an ancient Greek philosopher, a very well-known philosopher, who was called Protagoras. So you should find out who was Protagoras and why it's related to this book. It's something very interesting to find out. Number 4 is The Time Machine by H.G. Wells. This book is a true masterpiece, a mind-bending masterpiece of the history of literature, science fiction literature. There are several movies. They are more or less good, all of them, but not exactly very accurate sometimes. So that's one more reason to read the book. The fifth book is Flowers for Algernon by Daniel Keyes. This is a very important book under a linguistic point of view, for science fiction specifically. So you should read it also, not only because of that, but also because it suffered attempts of censorship. So yeah, it's a good idea to go through it and see what's going on. The next book is Planet of the Apes by Pierre. This is the French top science fiction classic. So if you don't read French, you just need to read translation. I guess all of them are pretty good. The one I read in English, published in Vintage, is very good. And again, it's quite different from the movies that you might have seen. All the movies. So just read the book. Next book is Heart of Darkness by Joseph Conrad. You know the movie Apocalypse Now? Well, it was based more or less on the book. So it doesn't matter if you enjoyed or not the movie, but you should definitely read the book if you haven't yet. Now, next one. This is Fahrenheit 451 by Ray Bradbury. You know what's going on in the book? Well, you have firemen, but the firemen are not quite firemen, because they burn books. Why? Well, read it. You'll see what's going on. The ninth book is Brave New World by Aldous Huxley. In this book, classic of science fiction, people are not born anymore, they are made. Next book, 10th, 1984 by George Orwell. It's just a nightmare. I cannot describe it. It's a nightmare. You have to read the nightmare and understand. That's it. There's nothing else. So you still want the mangoes? All right, the last two books of this first list. 11th. This is Crime and Punishment by Fyodor Dostoevsky. what to say about Crime and Punishment? It's one of the most important works in the whole history of literature. We could summarize it like saying it's about moral responsibility, but much more. You have to enhance that concept. So again, go ahead and read it. Now the last one. The last one is Don Quixote by Cervantes, the Spanish classic, written centuries ago. It's a book, well, Cervantes lived in the same period than Shakespeare. So Cervantes is for the Spanish language, what, excuse me, what Shakespeare is for the English language. So they just changed the history of the language itself. So they recreated the whole language. And we are still living from them, from their legacy. All right, so let's go with the second list, 12 more books. First one, Werther by Goethe, extraordinary German classic. How to put it? Goethe created the idea of romantic love, the romantic love that we know nowadays. And due to that idea, some people committed suicide. They killed themselves after reading the book. So read it, but don't kill yourself. Now, next book, Sense and Sensibility by Jane Austen. Ultra classic, but some people say now that it's chick lit from 200 years ago. Well, for us, that's not chick lit. We cannot reduce it to that category. It's more than that. It's an astonishing classic that you should read. All right, next two books. First, Resurrection by Tolstoy, Russian classic. But when we think of Tolstoy, we always think of Anna Karenina or War and Peace. So what are we going to do now? We're going to read Resurrection, a pretty different book. Now, the other one, this is D.H. Lawrence. He wrote Lady Chatterley's Lover. So what's the fuss with this book? It was censored back then. It was scandalous. Well, just think about in those times using the word F-U-C-K, which we know as fuck. Well, you couldn't use it back then. That was one of the main issues, the scandal. Fifth book, Lolita by Vladimir Nabokov. Extraordinary book, extraordinarily written. What is it about with the word Lolita? It's just the diminutive of a name, but it changed meaning after the book. Now the word Lolita always conveys a, let's say, dirty sense. So if you have not read the book and you want to know what's going on, please do. Next one, A Clockwork Orange by Anthony Burgess. Probably you have seen the movie by Kubrick, which the movie was forbidden for several years, at least in the UK. Well, the book is equally disturbing, a masterpiece developed through a new language called Natsat. Go ahead, please read it. And let's get something to eat. So we wanted to eat at this restaurant, an old place of ours, but it seems that it's not operating anymore. So let's move to the books. Next one, Lord of the Flies by William Golding. It's a very particular book because it shows what bad children do to good children when nobody's watching in an isolated place, specifically in an island. They are lost in an island. The other book, it's The Bridge on the Drina by Ivo Andrić, which, the author received the Nobel Prize of Literature. So this book can be considered a historical novel set in the Balkans, but it's not a new historical novel explaining the same over again. No, it's very special. It covers 2 or 3 centuries, and it's very distressing in some points. So that's it. And now, dude, I think we should go back to the other place. The ninth novel is The 40 Days of Musa by Franz Werfel. It's a tough novel about the Armenian genocide in the Ottoman Empire. So, based on actual events, of course, be ready for what you will find inside if you wish to go through it. Next one, Hopscotched by Julio Cortzar, the Argentinian extraordinary writer who, well, this novel is called Hopscotched because it can be read in different order. So you can change the order of the chapters. You don't need to go from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4. It's quite an experimental novel. As you can see, we have already eaten, so let's talk now about the last two books. The first one is To the Lighthouse by Virginia Woolf. This is a modernist classic, very difficult to understand, very difficult to read, because as the epitome of modernism that she was, this book collects an astonishing range of literary techniques that might prove confusing, a bit confusing, so you have to be patient when you read it. The last one, Time of Desecration by the Italian Alberto Moravia. It's a wondrous book. Be careful with the adjective wondrous. To me it's wondrous, but you have to understand that it's a book that underwent censorship issues in Italy due to its very brusque and explicit sexual references. So you have to be ready for that. But if you feel comfortable with that, just go ahead and enjoy this absolute Italian masterpiece. Well, we've come to the end of the list. We hope you give an attempt to the 24 books, or to 10 or 12 or 16. And see you next time in our next video on YouTube. Remember, just keep reading and don't die.